Right, same colour bishops. We've done two videos on bishop and pawn versus bishop, and then there's a small section in Dvoretsky on transpositions into bishop and pawn versus bishop. This first one is white to play. Pause the video and decide what would you do here. This is a nice, just small tactic, I guess, just like a tempo gaining maneuver that you should just be aware of. I mean, this has been set up. I say this has been set up. This is actually from a game from 1986, but it looks like a study that's been set up deliberately to be sort of on the what's the word? It's like this. It's the critical position where if you don't do your little tempo gaining trick that we're about to say, it's a draw, and if you do it, it's a win. So it almost looks like it's been deliberately set up as a study. It's actually a game from 1986. I mean, one very natural move to play here, and of course you know it's not the answer, otherwise why are we doing a video on it, is just to take the pawn. Bishop takes g4. But then black would take this bishop, take the pawn on a6, and we need to get the king out of the way, of course. You might be thinking, why doesn't it go a bit further forward? But it'll be where we want to challenge the black bishop, because unless we bring a king back to f4, black's just going to do the fortune teller thing on the g4 square. And black won't be able to arrange the fortune teller thing because we'll eventually be able to challenge it on this diagonal on the f3 square with our king on f4. With the king further on like f6, for example, that just wouldn't work. There'd be no place to challenge the black bishop. Anyway, so king f4, and the black king just gets across. There's the bishop coming to f3 straight away. King d6, g4, king e7. You can see that white's just getting nowhere there. The black king is easily sort of... I think the black king's actually going to make it to g7, and then they can just move their bishop around all day. So in the original position, the little tempo gaining trick you needed to use... I mean, if you like, everything's perfectly placed. The white bishop's perfectly placed, attacking and defending. The black king's perfectly placed because it's guarding a7 if white wants to chuck away the pawn, but at the same time, in the variation you just saw, for example, takes, king moves, straight and away the king's moving over. So the black king's perfectly placed, the white bishop's perfectly placed. Yeah, I mean, all those pieces are perfectly placed. And the white king's kind of perfectly placed as well, because it needs to support bishop takes g4. But in a minute, remember, the white king was going to come to f4 anyway. So you might even be gaining 2 tempi here, I'm not sure. But you're definitely gaining 1 by playing king f4. Okay, so the point behind this, I mean, I've just realised there might be a second point to it, in that we want our king on f4 anyway, because once this pawn falls, we might need to use it to support a bishop blocking the defending bishop on that diagonal, so black can't do the fortune teller thing and stop the white pawn moving forward to g4. If you are watching this video without having watched the bishop on pawn versus bishop, you're like, what are you talking about with the fortune teller thing? Then it's one of those fortune tellers we used to make at school, where if the bishop goes one way, you go the other one. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about, even if you don't. Yeah, and who's this video for anyway? Yeah, so king f4, and the point about this is that black now has to lose a move because this bishop's already perfectly placed. And what does black do? I mean, they've got to put their king back on a7. I mean, you might think, well, they can try and hit your bishop, and then your bishop moves, and the king comes back to b6. The king's still perfectly placed. Unfortunately, and you can pause the video here if you want and have a go, what would you play here as white? Unfortunately, it fails to this tactic here, a7. The black bishop desperately tries to stop this pawn, and then you can play bishop takes g4. The bishop has to stay on that diagonal, and then you can play bishop f3, and it is gone. So, in the original position after king f4, black has to play king a7 to keep their bishop perfectly placed. I mean, if they move their bishop, you're either going to take this pawn with your king, or you're going to take that pawn with your bishop and not lose your a pawn to the bishop. Okay, and in fact, it's even worse than that for black, because as soon as they defend this pawn, you'll be able to take it, and then they have to deal with the bishop being attacked, and then you go back and defend the a pawn. So that's clearly just winning. So black has to play king a7. Then you take on g4, and then we see sort of similar to what we just looked at, except that I think white's gained 2 moves there actually. I think the king f4 is actually gaining 2 tempi rather than just 1, because you wanted your king out the way of the g pawn anyway, and we forced the black king further away from the king side. I mean, by the way, black doesn't have to move their king over straight away. They could try something like bishop c8, and then you could play bishop g4 and then bishop f5, but that might go round in circles a little bit. But you can also bishop e4, king across, bishop f5, and it's going to be pretty similar to what we're about to see. So instead of bishop c8, king b6, and then the g pawn starts getting pushed. Okay, the black king sort of desperately trying to get over. And it's very similar to what we saw a minute ago, except that, like I say, white's gained 2 moves. So yeah, king e6. I mean, black could play king e7 there, which I'll come back to. But king e6, then the white king comes in. The bishop tries to get control of the g8 square. g7, king f7, king h6. I mean, it's just gone. The white king is threatening to get to h8, which we'll see in we'll let the white king get to h8 now actually. Black can try and prevent that, but I'll look at that in the other line anyway. But just to see what happens if in fact black can't try to prevent that here, can they? Because yeah, so bishop d3, bishop d5 check, and then g8 queen. So yeah, black can't stop the white king getting to h8. And now, I mean, this is an extreme example of a short diagonal. There's only 2 squares on this diagonal. As long as the king's controlling 2 of the squares on a 3-square diagonal, we know that that's a win. But with the king controlling 2 squares on a 2-square diagonal, that's even more obviously a win. King h6. I mean, what does black even try? The white bishop's going to come around to g8. Here it goes. Back there. Bishop there. I mean, you can actually challenge that with bishop e4. That's the sort of the usual way we do it. But it's even nicer than that. I think I would play this move. I mean, when I say this move, any of the next few moves. So I think bishop c4, any bishop move along that diagonal. Even f7, I think. I mean, obviously bishop f7 would be fine anyway, because you could just go back and try again. But I think bishop f7 actually. Bishop f7 is quite nice. That forces black to give up the bishop straight away, isn't it? But anyway, loads of different wins there. Let's go back to this position here, because it's if black tries king e7, so that's a sort of a better attempt to stop your king getting to h8. King g5, king f8, king h6, bishop to c4, and you'll see g7 check. Yeah, we can't play king h7 here because bishop d3 would actually draw, pinning the pawn to the king. So yeah, g7 check, king to g8, and then you go bishop e4. And now you're threatening bishop h7 check, followed by g8 queen. So black absolutely has to get out of the way of the g8 square, and then you're in, and it's going to be the same as we just saw. So yeah, watch out for that. That sort of idea in a same colour bishop's ending. And I suppose more generally in the ending, do not hurry. You don't have to take that pawn straight away. You can force the black king to a7. And I think I've actually realised in the process of making this video that king f4 actually saves 2 tempi, not just the 1. One is forcing the black king that way. Oh, not that way. That way. And the other one is we wanted our king out of the way of the pawn anyway. Right, next. There's no sort of pause the video moments on this one. This is a 1916 game involving Capablanca, and Dvoretsky just sort of spends ages going through it, because we are going to see in a minute the swapping of this pawn for this pawn. And that's going to give us bishop and pawn versus bishop. But it's all about, can the attacking side maneuver around in such a way that they achieve that swap and get into a winning position, and the defending side, sort of, what can they do to try and maneuver around so that when the swap happens, it's a drawn position. So for both sides, really good knowledge of bishop and pawn versus bishop, same colour bishops, is going to be extremely useful at any given point. Otherwise, you won't be able to analyse what you're transposing into. You kind of just need to know that. Like, the more knowledge you have, the better. You're not calculating, oh, if he plays that, I play that, and the rest of it. You're just sort of like, that position's, oh, that's going to be a draw, isn't it? Because we're going to get the opposition from the rear. Or that's going to be a win because we haven't got the opposition from the rear, and we're just going to chase the bishop round, and black can't do the fortune teller thing. Or in this particular position, that pawn's going to end up, well, if it's trying to get past the b6 square, that's a diagonal with 4 squares or fewer, and you know that can be drawn quite happily. And if it's got to that square, that's a diagonal with 2 squares or fewer. Two squares, and so that's just a loss regardless. So all those sorts of knowledge things, really useful. Anyway, let's see how the game went. In fact, before we see how the game went, let's just look at a sort of a primitive try at this. Okay, so king c5, just go for it straight away. b4, king back to c4, black just waits, bishop c5. As soon as the bishop relinquishes control of g7, we come in, takes, bishop out the way, straight away controlling a very important square. Bishop f2 is also a draw, but it's a bit more complicated. Bishop g3 is a bit simpler. Bishop c3, king takes g6. White starts to push the pawn, and yeah, the black bishop comes back, covers the b6 square, and you can see that it's just white's just not going to get what they want here. The black king's going to be too close. King d5, king e7, king c6, king to d8. Any bishop, the bishop check's useless because the king goes to c8, and if king b7, king to d7, and yeah, I mean black can just do the fortune teller thing on the b6 square. The only way that white can make progress there is to drop their king back to a6 and do the manoeuvring around before eventually challenging the black bishop on that diagonal. In fact, they can do that straight away. They don't need to do all the chasing the bishop around. So yeah, we saw king a6. The problem with king a6 is it just lets the black king back to c8 straight away. And now there's just no challenging the bishop on that diagonal at all. In fact, we covered this in the other video. This is a frontal defense for black now, where they just stay on this diagonal. Okay, if they get challenged on b6, they go away and do the fortune teller thing, and if they get challenged on a5, they just take and bring the king to b7. So draw. So the primitive attempt to quickly swap and hope the b pawn wins the day doesn't work. Capablanca, I suspect, he's renowned for being incredible at endgames, or was renowned. Is renowned for being incredible at endgames back when he was alive. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he would have worked all of that out and tried a bit of sort of waiting around. So he tries to improve the position first. So king e4, black doesn't have to push the pawn straight away, but most other moves are going to end up in a similar sort of position. I mean, bishop e1, king d5, king c5, and it's going to sort of get to a similar position to what we're about to look at anyway. So it's, we may as well, in a sense, just get on with analysing. Okay, the black pawn's on b4, and Capablanca challenges the bishop, brings the king back to d3, and then plays bishop d2. You think, well, that's quite clever, because now the black bishop has to go away and you win the b pawn, but the g pawn would then fall because king g7. So bishop to f2, king to e4 coming to defend the g pawn. So now it really is the b pawn is threatened, and now black blunders. Black blunders with bishop c5. Black absolutely had to play king g7 here just to force the white king away from the b pawn and then defend it. And we'd end up in a sort of similar position to the game, but the white king's been pulled away. Okay, and white had to then spend the white king's been pulled away to defend g6, and white sort of had to manoeuvre around to then get the bishop in the right place to check the king back to g8 anyway. Let's just carry on with the game. So in this position, black defended the b pawn, king d5 hits the bishop, bishop drops back, king c4, king to g7, and this isn't too dissimilar from the position in the game that like white's done some manoeuvring to get it set up so the black king's as far away as possible and got sort of the best advantage that he can get for taking that pawn, and then goes for it, takes the pawn, and then the bishop drops back to d8. And now Capablanca blunders. It's very hard to see why, but bishop c3 check is a blunder. Okay, the winning move is actually bishop d2. Okay, not bishop c3 check. If you're watching this for the first time, or seeing this position, sorry, for the first time, well, unless you're some sort of super grandmaster or something, or extremely good at bishop endgames, you're going to wonder why. Like, I mean, I didn't understand it in the slightest when I sort of read, oh yeah, bishop d2 is the winning move. But I promise you, in a minute, stick with me, and you will understand why bishop d2 was necessary to be played. So bishop c3 check, king takes g6, b4, king starts to come across, king d5, and in this position, black resigned. Okay. Was it this position? It was this position, I think it was this position, yeah. Black resigned. And the engine's saying plus 0.1. So Capablanca's opponent should have carried on. And the drawing plan is rear opposition again. We've got our bishop guarding the b6 square. White's going to have to get his king, his pawn up to b5, the king to c6, or possibly over to a6, and try and set up some sort of chasing the bishop around before challenging it on the right diagonal, etc., etc. And in the meantime, black's going to have time to come around and set up the rear opposition. So black should have played king f4, and the game could have carried on bishop d4. I mean, if instead bishop e5 check, the king's going to get to the rear even quicker. Okay. Black's going to achieve what they want even quicker. So bishop d4, really trying to shoulder that king away. You want to keep the king away as long as possible. You're going to get your pawn to b5, king to c6, and then challenge the bishop, chase it around and push the b pawn. That's the plan, basically. But black just still obstinately says, I don't care if I've got to go all the way down the board. I can come back and get the rear opposition. There's the challenge of the bishop. Bishop back to g5. Clears the way. Bishop has to come back to e3, of course. It's sort of done now, because we're about to get the rear opposition. The pawn can't be pushed straight away. So the way that white would usually make progress here is to play bishop d6, and we're going to make the challenge on this diagonal, whilst the we're going to make the challenge on that diagonal, basically. But if bishop d6 happened, then we would just see king c4, and that's the rear opposition. So black had just enough time to achieve it. However, white does have one extra sneaky winning try here, which can only be thwarted by understanding another little tactic that you should be aware of, that it's worth us all being aware of in bishop and pawn versus bishop. Let's have a look at it. So the white king comes back to d5, and that changes the dynamic a little bit, in that now the challenge can be made on the c5 square rather than well, I suppose it was always the c5 square anyway, but it can be made on the c5 square, but the black king can't come to c4, so preventing the rear opposition. And if black isn't aware of what's going on here, this is going to lose. So, for example, if the king across to c3, just sort of trying to come around that way, bishop d6, we cannot stop bishop c5 happening now because we can't make our way to b4 with the king. So if we come back with a bishop, I mean, if instead king b3, you get challenged on that diagonal straight away, king a4, king c6 is gone. So if we come back, so that when we get challenged, we could have gone back the other way, we'd see king c6, and again it's gone, because yeah, if the bishop challenges this way, yeah, then we just go back on this diagonal, and that's going to be a draw. But white doesn't show his hand in this position, king c6, and it's black that has to decide which diagonal they're going on, and you can go to c5 or c7, challenging on the diagonal they've just moved on, and that's going to be a win. So yeah, just to recap. So in this position here, where white's come round, black's come round to get the rear opposition, white has this extra sneaky king d5, just stopping that rear opposition. And what you have to play here as black, I mean, pause the video and have a go at it here. You know, we've seen that your king's blocked out. If you try and get it to c3, bishop d6, and you've just had it, no matter what you try and do. So what do? Like, this isn't looking good. And the last little extra beautiful tactic, which I haven't covered in any video at all so far, is this idea, bishop d2, where b6 gets hit immediately by this pin. The white king's too far away, so we're just going to take the b pawn or the c7 bishop next move. So that was the sneaky extra move. And let's say white just waits, bishop d8, we come back to e3. Okay, so we get a bit of messing around going on. King c6, that's bishop back to e3, and oh yeah, so now white's got one last little try, which is to hope we fall asleep. And once the king's on the a6 square, we need to be controlling a5. And at the moment, the king's quite a long way away, so you have to play king c4, king a6, and again, if black's just asleep, they think they've got it covered with, you know, just a waiting move like bishop f2. Oops, just messed it up. And we'll see the classic: chase the bishop away, come back. Black does the fortune teller thing, but we're coming to challenge on a5, and black's not in time. So in this position, you have to, rather than lose a move with bishop f2, use your move with king b3, challenge, out the way, clear the b6 square, other diagonal, come to a5. No, you're not coming to a5. And then that's a draw. So to recap where we've got to in this game, if white goes to take the b pawn straight away, it was quite primitive and black draws fairly comfortably. Capablanca did a bit of messing about, trying to set up an advantageous position to exchange at the right time. I mean, that bishop d2 move was pretty clever, for example. Bishop f2, come to defend the g-pawn, and this is where black blunders with with bishop c5. Should have played king g7 to drag the white king away. Doesn't. Now it's a win for white. And at this point, Capablanca throws away the win with bishop c3 check when he should have played bishop d2. It didn't matter because his opponent resigned there instead of playing king f4 and doing the rear opposition thing that we just saw. So why was bishop d2 the winning move? Well, you've probably worked it out already, because after bishop d2, king takes g6, push the b pawn, king across, shoulder it away. I don't care, I'm going to go and do the rear opposition thing. It's just like, well, good luck with that. Okay, so we've shouldered the black king even further away. King g4, b5, king f3, and the white king makes its way over, and we're going to get the challenge in on the a5 square. It was that one extra move. King b3, bishop a5. I mean, I guess the conclusion from all of that is, you know, if you get this position in a game, where was it? Here, you know, do you think you're, do I think I'm going to be able to find bishop d2 because of all of that? That's a big ask, isn't it? It's a very big ask. I mean, we either just give up and don't bother trying to learn anything and just sort of carry on playing at the level we're at, or if we're going to make serious attempts to try and improve, as I'm trying to personally, then yeah, I suppose we'd have to look at positions like this and work out, you know, is there a way that I could understand the rear opposition thing that black's trying to do and sort of foresee it and play bishop d2? I don't know. I mean, just all these ideas, at least understanding the bishop and pawn versus bishop, all the various attacking and defensive maneuvers that we should be aware of. That's got to be advantageous, isn't it? Yeah. Right, one final position then. So this is black to play. Pause the video and decide what would you do here. So it's pretty tricky, this one. The first thing to note sort of is fairly easy to dismiss quite early on, just bringing the king over and letting that pawn advance to b5 straight away. So king f6, b5, get the king over. White would just push the pawn. Bishop e2, just sort of stopping the white king making progress. Bishop c6, we're going to come back and challenge the black bishop on the b5 square. Bishop out the way, the white king is getting to a7. And that's a diagonal with just 3 squares on it. The black king on a7 is going to control 2 of them, and we've seen lots of different times how that white bishop on b5 is eventually going to control c8. So king f6, not good. But then you think, well, what else do you do? Because the only way to stop b5 on the next move is bishop e2, but it doesn't look very clever, because it's like you've lost a move. Like, white needs their bishop out of the way of this b pawn anyway, and you just let yourself be challenged on that diagonal. Now you've got to move your bishop again, and you move it to f3. So what's the point in that? You might be thinking straight away. Well, one sort of stupid question is, well, why didn't we just play bishop f3 now? You know, why did we have to play bishop e2 and then bishop f3? It doesn't make any sense. We've lost a move there. We should have played bishop f3 straight away. It's like, well, yeah, I think we can see why we don't play bishop f3 straight away. So there is a point to bishop e2, other than just, you know, it doesn't just lose a move. We want our bishop on this diagonal. So bishop e2. Another problem I had with it is what happens if white just ignores it. We can see this king's coming over in a minute, and we'll just bring our king in first of all. So king b6, king f6, challenge the bishop on that diagonal. It moves, and you know we get our bishop. I suppose it's quite a good square, isn't it? Sort of out of the way. The problem you've got is that black's going to do the fortune teller thing, and you're going to have to bring your king back to a5 anyway, and then black can just drop the bishop back on this diagonal. Black's definitely made progress there. So you don't want to do that. After bishop e2, you do want to challenge on that diagonal straight away. The black bishop comes to f3. And now white pushes the pawn. Okay. Again, why does white have to push the pawn? It feels wrong to sort of get the pawn ahead of the king. Why don't you just get the king in sort of ahead, shoulder this king away, and then the pawn can kind of come through afterwards? I mean, from f3, for example, the black bishop, it can't control b5. So, you know, why not... let's go back. Why not, in this position... yeah, why not king b6 here? Well, all right, the black bishop can't control b5, but it doesn't need to do it yet, because white's not ready to play b6 in 2 moves' time. So one simple defense here is bishop back to d1. And, you know, we're going to do the fortune teller thing on the b5 square. Okay, but something else that's even another defence that's worth understanding, just because in another situation it might be the only thing you can do, something we saw in that Capablanca game as well, is black can actually play king f6 here. Thinking, oh, well, that's a mistake, isn't it now? Because king c7, and there's no way that black can stop b5 on the next move. They might have to go to h5, so they come to e8 or d1. I think both of those moves are actually, in fact, they are the only two drawing moves. So bishop h5 is fine, bishop d1 is fine, because you might think, well, bishop h5, that's too late. You're not going to get your bishops there in time, because look, I'm playing b5 this move. Okay, oops, pin, lovely. Okay. I'm back in this position, bishop d1, same thing. So the king's gone all the way to c7, it has to come all the way back to a5 now, and then that's clearly going to let the black king in. And an easy draw, basically. So that leaves white with sort of the only real dangerous plan is to push the pawn now whilst they can. But it's not going to work. The black's going to be able to set up the defence they need. b5, b6, king f6, sorry, king to e7, and it's just going to take white too long to challenge, basically. Bishop back to b7, and in fact, it's sort of the defensive setup's already there. Bishop g4. I mean, let's say the white king comes over to... let's say the white king's planning to come round. We can even let the white king come to d6. Okay, king d8. There's nothing wrong with this. There's not really a losing move here, other than moving your bishop and relinquishing control of a6. So you can actually just move your king around here, and as soon as the white king gets to d6, we do the it's the attacking bishop on this diagonal, defending bishop on this diagonal. As it is, I mean, a more sensible move is king d6. We can even shoulder the white king away from the whole situation. So yeah, it looks fairly desperate, but it's actually quite a simple draw. Bishop e2, bishop a6, bishop back to f3, and then just bring your king over. By the way, that last position, this video is called Transpositions to Bishop and Pawn versus Bishop. You might have been sensibly thinking, this is already bishop and pawn versus bishop. And yes, it is, but it's not the final sort of, the white pawn's quite a long way back. It's just the way the pieces are set up. It's primed for white to get that pawn moving quite quickly. So it was transposing from bishop and pawn versus bishop, where the pawn's a bit further back, to this position, which is just the simple reciprocal zugzwang position.